Good day. My name is Mark, and I'm a staff writer and researcher for the New Zealand Christian Network. And I've been asked to make this short video about the New Zealand government's hate speech legislation proposals and to provide some material so as to better pray about this current legislation that is before us and is being discussed before us. Now, as you all know, the New Zealand government is proposing changes to hate speech laws. And the government has put out 6 proposals for consultation. And these proposals are set out in the public consultation document, which they've released, entitled Proposals Against Incitement of Hatred and Discrimination. Now, Proposal 1 expands the categories for hate speech from just being about color, race, or ethnic or national origins, and it expands it to also include sex, gender, including gender identity, religious belief, disability, and sexual orientation. Proposals 2 and 4 seek to make changes which would prohibit speech which maintains or normalizes hatred in both the civil and criminal versions of the law. Proposal 5 seeks to change the civil provision so that it makes incitement to discrimination against the law. And this would make it unlawful to incite others to discriminate against members of a group based on grounds such as their sex, their gender, religious belief, color, race, ethnic or national origins, disability, or sexual orientation. Proposal 6 seeks to clarify and strengthen the protections for transgender, diverse, and intersex people. And finally, Proposal 3 seeks to increase the punishment for the criminal offenses to up to 3 years imprisonment or a fine of up to $50,000. So those are the 6 proposals, basically in a nutshell. They want to expand the groups that are affected by hate speech, and they want to be a little more concise about what hate speech involves, and they want to increase some of the punishments for those who are convicted by hate speech. Now, a lot could be said about these proposals and the concerns Christians could and should have about them, but I want to focus on just one, and that is the subjectivity of the concept of hatred. For starters, and I think this needs to be said, it should be noted that the problems with censoring hate speech do not necessarily come from the intention of this set of proposals. I believe that the intentions of the government in this matter are largely driven by good concerns. The atrocity that happened on March 15th, 2019 against the Muslim community is absolutely reprehensible. And I think we can all fully appreciate the desire to make sure that something like that never happens again in New Zealand. And so the problem of censoring hate speech isn't in the intention, but rather in the near impossibility of censoring hate speech without also impinging on things like freedom of religion and freedom of speech. Second, there is currently no widely accepted definition of hate speech. It is currently an incredibly subjective term and thus gives far too much leeway for the law to be selectively enforced according to people and speech that authorities just happen to dislike. Third, hate is an emotion. This makes legislating hate speech difficult given that it is based on the subjective emotions of the perpetrator and the receiver. Anyone who has been closely following media or Western culture in the last few years realizes that hatred can now mean nothing more than mere disagreement. Just disagreeing with someone publicly can now be grounds that you hate that person or group if they feel offended by what you say or even could be offended by what you say. This is then made all the more complicated when you enter in a third subjective party like the police or the government or a human rights commissioner or whoever they ultimately decide to discern these things, who then have to discern between the subjective perpetrator and the subjective receiver of said speech. And so you just have this huge mess of subjectivity when the punishments and potentially long legal processes in these proposals demand objectivity. Given that the gospel, by its very nature, can be offensive to people, even when shared with the utmost gentleness and respect, this should cause considerable concern for Christians. For example, could it be illegal to preach that Christ is ultimately the only way to God? Further, many Christians, as with many secular people and people of other faiths, have real cautions about the sexual identity views being increasingly put on society. Will those who express cautions about that or who voice traditional values be accused of hate under this new legislation? That is an important question that needs to be clarified. It should also be noted that banning hate speech does not remove hatred and divisiveness from society, because mere banning of speech will not address some of the underlying causes of that hate speech. It would also create another risk in that people who do hold seriously hateful ideas and views will have fewer opportunities to have their ideas and views changed or challenged through discourse and debate. Now, does that mean the government or the church or us as individuals should do nothing to address hate speech? No, not at all. We should all be working hard against all hate, all violence, all racism and injustice, and always speaking with compassion, gentleness, and respect. Instead of changing hate speech laws, though, we should be encouraging more people to tell their story so as to add genuine diversity and complexity to the public discourse. The solution is more speech, not less. More sharing, more learning about why people may feel offense at what is said, and coming to a better understanding of each other. Hatred often stems from ignorance. Finally, sometimes groups need to be criticized. The Christian church has not been perfect in the past. For example, in my native Canada, the church is currently experiencing a reckoning for their poor treatment of First Nations people. Hate speech legislation would prevent properly needed critique of the church in this regard. But here's the thing. The Christian church is not the only group in the world that makes mistakes. Every group can make mistakes. And so we need the ability to actually interact with people and say things that they potentially could find offensive so that we all can learn from our mistakes and become better participants in this wonderful country of ours. Iron sharpens iron, as the famous proverb teaches. And so with that said, here are 3 suggested prayer requests. First, that the New Zealand public will become aware of the significant dangers to freedom of belief, freedom of expression, and freedom of speech posed by what is being proposed, and express their concerns on their response to the discussion document. Second, that the Christian community becomes well informed on this matter and how it could seriously affect Christian people and churches, and then make clear, constructive, and persuasive feedback to the government. And then 3, that the government would listen to these concerns and then shape the legislation in a way which genuinely protects the freedoms of religious belief, expression, and speech. Thank you again. Thank you for this for listening, and I hope you check out more New Zealand Christian Network material. Cheers.